Instagram followers, welcome to another one of our lives tonight. We are joined by the wonderful Alan Robinson from Vet Dynamics, and we're going to be talking about the ins and outs of vet practice. So we're going to get through a few nitty-gritty bits, talk a bit about financials and some of the awkward questions that maybe you always want to be answering. So I'm going to pass straight over to Alan, who can explain a bit about who he is, what he does, and how I'm going to do him tonight.
Yes, mate. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation as well. As you know, I'm a huge fan of Canine Arthritis and the work that you guys do. Brett, we were just saying, probably very much underappreciated by many in the profession. I think your client base must love it. But yeah, absolute pleasure to be here, and really good to be able to share thoughts and ideas. So yeah, really looking forward to some questions from the people on the call. Happy to take anything that comes our way. But I think my brief was, let's see, get a little bit of understanding of how veterinary business actually works, what vets go through, and of course we're all going through COVID at the moment, which is an added dimension for all the things we have to do. A little bit about me. I am a vet, or I was a vet. I'm feeling much better now, actually. But I qualified in Queensland, Australia, a long time ago. I won't say how long ago. But I worked in mixed practice in Australia, and then came to England, the usual travelling with a knapsack. Got involved with the locals, married, children, businesses, and the whole works. So I've ran a mixed practice in Wiltshire for many years. I sold that in 1999, and I was very interested in business management all the time, how businesses work, how veterinary practice worked. I left the profession for a while, did some work outside, but then I came back. And since really 2005, really, I've run a business consultancy for veterinary practices purely. Of course, the whole veterinary profession has changed dramatically in that time. We've had a huge corporatization go on. So we've had the private equity money coming in, looking at this profession, which was very disparate in many ways, bought up a lot of practice. So I think at the moment, we're probably about 80% corporate, and leaving about 20% of still independent practices. Now that's significant to me, because in my business, we work primarily with independent practices. That's our market. That's who we look after mostly. Those that have gone to the corporate market, obviously they have their corporate owners and bosses to look after them. But we feel that the independents are the ones that we need to work with. So interesting times. We work on all the stuff that's non-clinical, essentially. So there's the finance stuff, staying in business, getting bills paid. There's the human resources, the people management, how to keep people motivated and working well. There's marketing, there's sales, there's a whole range of stuff that we work with practices. You might agree with this, you might understand that vets are generally very good at fixing dogs, cats and horses, but they're not real good business people a lot of the time. They just, considering their course, 5-6 years at university, in my generation, absolutely no business training whatsoever. Since, I don't know about your generation, but whether you had any at college, I think the graduates coming through now get a little bit, but it's cramming it into a very, very full curriculum. Don't forget, we're covering 6 or 8 species of animals across all disciplines, and then to squeeze a bit of a business in it. And to be honest, the two things missing from the curriculum is we're going into a business, most of us, and we're going to deal with people is the other bit we seem to forget somewhere. And sometimes in between those two things, things fall through the cracks, and I suspect that's where this conversation this evening is going to go. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm sure I won't say, my professor probably tell me off from university saying, we did teach you this, but I didn't come out of university with business skills at all. And even just being employed for some of my colleagues, I was lucky because I'd had some time out before university, so I'd been employed before. I'd had a clinical role before, so I kind of knew what it was like to be employed and to work. But a lot of vets have never had a job before. because they've been so focused. You don't have time to have a job while you're at vet school most of the time. You're on placement constantly, and it's a whole new world. And then to end up working your way up the veterinary ladder, what often happens is vets then become practice managers who've got no previous managerial experience, and it is a whole new world. So I don't think we're necessarily natural salespeople either. I don't know what you think, but I'm not the best at, if we could, we'd give everything away for free. We just want to help the animals, but that's not actually the way that it's possible to run and for us to stay in a job. So in terms of why we've come up with this talk is just because sometimes we get comments about vets charging loads of money because they're just money grabbers, and they want to take all the money and don't care about the pets, and they've not come at it from a loving point of view. If they love the pet, they would do it for free. And we kind of wanted to get to why we don't work like that, and why it's not an NHS for pets. Unfortunately, it is a private business. And so Alan, could you just go through, I guess, a bit of a broad question, but where does the money that a client pays for their pet's treatment, where does that actually go?
Well, who knows? Straight out with it. Interesting question. Now, that's a good question to start on, because actually I need to teach vets that one as well, because I do a lot of training with practices. Now, if you own a business, you kind of get the idea where the money comes in and where the money goes out, because you're the one handling that money. And obviously, there's a very basic principle. As long as you've got more coming in than going out, you will stay in business. If you've got more going out than coming in, you probably won't stay in business. It's as simple as that. So a lot of the employed vets, the employed nurses, the receptionists, a lot of people who work in a veterinary business have no understanding of business either. So this is something we need to teach them. And there's a very simple rule we work on. It's called the £120 rule. So just imagine you go to the vet and you have some treatment and it comes to £120, the bill. So as that £120 is being paid across the desk, the client's thinking, £120, it's a lot of money. What did they do? I was only here for 15 minutes and that's an awful lot of money. And the receptionist may even be saying, oh, I'm sorry, it's £120. Yes, I know it's a lot of money, and almost apologising for this money. So we get this sort of dynamic going around guilty for charging this money. But let's look at that £120. Hopefully everyone understands VAT. Okay, it's a government tax that comes out of everything a veterinary does. Every veterinary treatment has £20 as the VAT charge. So the £120 turns into £100 because £20 goes to the VAT straight up. Okay. Now, obviously, a veterinary practice, it has a building, has people it's employee, has to buy stock and inventory and drugs and food and other such stuff. It has to pay its rates and it has to pay gas and electric. So that first bit of what we call the admin charge of just paying the fees to be in business, the building, the rents, rates, gas, electric, that's around 16%. So for that £100, £16 is gone, goes to that. 16 to £20 is around about that. Now, we employ vets who are reasonably well paid, but by no way, as you all know this, and nowhere near as well as some of our other professional partners, doctors, solicitors, etc., but paid okay. So we pay, and we employ nurses, and usually about 2 to 3 nurses per vet, and then there's reception and admin staff and other such things. So that represents about £40 to £50 of that £100 goes straight to wages, because we've got national insurance and other such things as well. Now, the other thing we have to buy in the drugs and the food and the medicines and the injections and resell those out. That costs another £25 to £30, and that includes laboratory supplies and other things. Now, if you do your sums, that leaves about 5 or 10% left over. Okay, so that's what the vet business gets to keep. That 5 to, let's say, £10 to be generous. That £10 is what's left. So 10 pence in every pound you spend is what the vet gets to keep. However, they still have to pay tax on that. They still have to pay back their loans with that. They still have to buy new equipment with that, and they have to use that to give pay rises if they're going to give pay rises to other people. So that £10 is squeezed down to probably £2 or £3, to be honest. And what the vets take in an average practice is probably £2 or £3 in the 100. of actually take-home money that is left over in the business. Now, everyone's been paid and all the bills have been paid, but that's the excess profit. Now, if you look at it in terms of just profit loss accountancy, the average veterinary practice pulls in around 5 to 8% profit. 5 to 8 pounds out of every 100 is what's left over. But that's got to be, like I said, tax purposes. So it's pretty slim pickings, but as you quite rightly said, vets do this from a fairly altruistic point of view. If they were that worried about money, they'd do something about that, but they tend to work first and ask for money later. We have a saying in management that vets learn to discount before they learn to count.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a lot of these factors. So there's a lot of the way vets think around money it's not their primary focus. But the problem is, to run a veterinary business is really expensive. Yeah. So there's this inbuilt dissonance. I'm not that bothered about money, but hey, everything costs a load of money and I've got to earn that money. Now, as an employee, if you work in a business, you have an obligation to earn the money, to charge what the boss charges, says you've got to charge, and you've got to ask the client for that. So it's a difficult one to weigh up, and I can appreciate people coming in with animals, etc., that are ill and having surprises, because some of these bills get quite large. But the basic lesson from tonight is medicine isn't cheap. It's just expensive. It's just expensive to do because it takes expensive people, it takes highly skilled people, it takes highly expensive drugs, it takes highly expensive equipment in a big brick and mortar building big enough to have your animal. And of course, as you'll know, every veterinary practice is a mini hospital. It's got an x-ray, a laboratory, an endoscope, it's got ophthalmoscopes, it's got all the diagnostic kit, and it has to have all the drugs that it needs for day-to-day and emergency use. So I hope that gives you some idea of where it all goes.
Yeah. I always say that I think if I was really sick, I'd like to be a pet, because at least you can have things done at the same day by the same person. It's not passed between pillar and post. We offer, I think as vets, we forget what a great service we do offer. But yeah, it's not a comfortable conversation, having a money conversation with owners. It's not, because we're not people who are that interested in money, honestly. I don't know many, I actually genuinely don't know a money grabbing vet. I haven't got a single colleague I've worked with and I've thought, oh, they're just doing that for the money, because I don't think they would be a vet, honestly, if that was the case. And you did touch on it a little bit. Do you mind talking about the average salary of a vet and a vet nurse?
Yeah, interesting. So there's some studies done in 2005 looking at the average salary of vets compared to doctors and dentists and solicitors, etc. Yeah. And vets came in at the lower end of that. And the average veterinary salary, when we say the average, take the top, take the bottom, somewhere in the middle, around about £38,000 a year for a veterinary salary. Now, obviously, some people paid more than that, others paid less, but that's kind of it. If we come forward 15 years, 2015 or 2020, the average salary is about £43,000. But if you actually compare dentists, they're at 76. And if you look at GPs, they're at 85. But your older GP runs on an average salary of about 120. But a high-performing vet would probably peak out at around about 75 to 80,000 pounds. So a reasonable amount of money, but believe me, that's highly skilled with a fairly hefty management responsibility. And of course, with the corporatisation going on, the corporates are having to figure out these pay scales, whereas in the past there's been a little bit of, we'll pay you what we think you're worth, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, if you're in a profession for the money, go and be a plumber or a solicitor. I mean, this isn't the one to get into to make a load of money, because you're not getting paid. Nurses, they've been grossly underpaid for a long, long time. They're the most unappreciated bunch of people on this planet, as far as I'm concerned. They work really hard, hugely dedicated. They've got to put up with vets for another thing. I mean, how bad is that to put up your life? And then they're paid not so well. It's getting better, only because the last 4 or 5 years there's been a massive lack of nurses to choose from. And there's also been a massive lack of vets, and we'll get into those reasons in a minute. So the nurse wages have gone up. So well-qualified nurse, veterinary nurse. Don't think it's a 3 to 4 year course to do veterinary nursing as well that you've got to go through. They're on probably 25 to 28,000, something like that. But if you're that's your career and that's what you've chosen to do, you hit this ceiling of £28,000. Where do you go from there if you've got mortgages and kids and all this sort of stuff? And that's why we had this massive attrition from the profession, because nurses weren't going anywhere. Yeah. So they step out of nursing and go and work for pharmaceutical companies to be territory managers and drug reps and those sorts of things, which pay somewhat better. But it's kind of a catch-22 because there's none of this profit. Okay, there's a lot of money goes through veterinary, but not much profit. They can't give the pay rises to attract better people, and so we get this sort of just wastage, unfortunately, of vets and nurses in that. So, yeah, like I said, salary-wise, it's not brilliant for a professional point of view, particularly for the amount of training. Just on a point, vet going through veterinary school, I don't know about you, did you come out with a fairly hefty student loan? You probably may still have one. Okay, so
I'm probably never going to pay mine off.
That's true. So you're born into this world. You don't start earning money for 5 to 6 years after high school. Whereas if your mate sort of went and got a job straight away, they're earning money day one. And then you come out with £50,000 to £60,000 debt, and it can go up to much more than that. And that's how you start life. And you want to get a mortgage, you want to have kids, you want to go and get on with life. Really difficult. And there's something deeply psychological about heavy debt that just weighs on you. Now, we've got this option: do you pay back your university loan or not, or you pay this increment? And it kind of sits there forever. And that weighs on vets a lot. And that's one of the hardest things they need to bear as they go on in life as well, amongst other things. And I think the younger generation have just been burdened with a load of debt that's not giving them the return on investment necessary. Now, just don't want to go too many violins for vets here, because vets do have some responsibility here and can do very well. It is still, in my view, the best job in the world.
Yeah.
It could be if we could shift a few things. So that might be part of the topic. I see we've got quite a few comments coming through there as well.
Yeah, so I think there's a few comments I think I'd like to touch on. Penny's mentioned about big practices owning multiple vet practices, so corporates, and their standpoint. And Rosemary's asked, do you think there's an advantage of being with a big corporate vet practice compared to an independent? So I wanted to just touch a bit on that, on what you feel the difference is from the service of a corporate versus an independent practice.
Okay, well, two aspects to that. For young vets coming through, sometimes the corporate model can be more appealing because there's a job, there's a career escalation, there's a pay scale, you've got this bit of mobility built into it, and it's kind of simple. Boom. Whereas in the old days, you had to go and find a job with an independent, sort of ask for a succession plan. Can I be a partner in the business, and work your way through that way? It could be easy for some people. Now, from a management point of view, I see there's one comment there: corporates just seem to be money first, people second. A common enough statement. However, as I said, your typical small animal practice is much more flexible. They can actually do it their own because they own the business. They do that, and the bosses are probably the biggest discounters in the whole practice. Okay, but they've got to pay the bills, they earn enough, etc. Whereas if you're employed by a corporate business, there are corporate rules. You are an employee and you abide by the rules, and that corporate has borrowed several £1 million to buy the practice and owes that money to someone else. There is a commercial arrangement all down the line. So the rule is, guys, you're in this business, we're giving you this opportunity, here's the fee scale, you need to charge the clients appropriate for that so we can actually pay the bills further down the line. Believe me, none of that money accrues in anyone's pocket particularly. It goes to run the business most of the time. Admittedly, buying and selling practices has private equity capitalization in it, but that's a different story altogether. For the boys and girls, vets and nurses on the ground, it makes no difference what happens on a day-to-day basis. You just do the work best you can. Now, there's probably a distinction we need to make here. Price you pay is only significant in the absence of value. So if you as a client haven't perceived value, you might say that was damn expensive, okay? Which is perfectly valid in any transaction that you have. Yeah, if we had a builder here and he left the cupboard door falling off, I probably wouldn't want to pay him either. I think he was expensive and rubbish, okay? So the part of it is vets have a responsibility to deliver value to the client in all the ways, of course. And they're up against it in some ways because they've learned to fix animals. They're mechanics in some way. They know the mechanics of a sick animal. If you tweak this, it gets better here. And you give it this injection, it gets better there. Kind of works that way. Then you're going to translate that to a client communication. And most vets do that pretty well. A small proportion aren't great communicators. There's a given in that. Or a bigger problem, because vets are just so busy most of the time, because they're so tired most of the time, because they're just so trying to do their best for so many people, they fail a lot on that score. You can probably reflect on that and sit in your day-to-day work sometimes. And you see a lot. And it's not that they're trying to be malicious or money grabbing. They just can't do the job at that rate continuously. Now, put us into a COVID situation. We've got vets who have been working 4 months solid without a break and just trying to hold together because, there's people on furlough and all sorts of arrangements going on. I think you've just gone back to off
I've been lucky. I've not been
furlough. So you've been lucky until you got there, and then you saw how busy it was, and I'm sure half the systems that you were used to have changed as well. Yeah. So now you've got a whole nother confusion to set up with. So, they're, as I said, number one, vets are very expensive because they have to be to deliver what they do, high-level veterinary medical care and surgical care. But as a client, you've got to feel you've got the value of that expense, the money you pay, in some sort of recognition of your needs and things. You want the animal healthy better as well, and really some sense that you've got what you want and haven't been rushed through the consulting room and out the other side before you sort of backside hit the chair sort of thing. And we've got a lot to learn on that, and that's what a lot of what our work is, teaching vets to communicate more than anything else, I would suspect.
Yeah, providing that value, that totally makes sense. Let's have a look what other questions we've got coming. So, Lynn's talked a little bit about women's representation. So she says, I wonder if vets used to have a more comparable salary to other professions before women's representation increased. Call me cynical, but when professions become feminized, salaries decline relatively. That's an interesting point. So is there a gender pay gap within the vet profession? What's your opinion on that?
Good question, Lynn. Very, very tough. I won't call you cynical either. They did a study through the BVA last year, and they looked at gender bias, particularly around pay gaps and all, like as they did globally. I think a lot of companies came under that sort of thing. Vets didn't come out very well on that, to be honest. We actually came up with a fairly hefty gender bias in pay and what females pay. Now, considering our profession is 60% female and growing as it goes, under 30, it's nearer 80% female. We have a massive feminization at that level, which creates its own problems around supply of vets and working hours and working times and more stress, to be honest, is what it's causing on people. So if you've got to work in that difficult emotional environment day in, day out with demanding clients and demanding cases, and you've got a couple of kids at home and a husband to sort out as well, as husbands need sorting out, as you know, that's an added burden. So yes, it has been addressed. It's been picked up by the Royal College and the BVA to be looked at and addressed. And of course, this was falling much more to the corporate need because they are the biggest employers. Fortunately, because they are corporate, they are putting in pay scales and they are addressing that gender balance far better. It may be the independents are getting away with that a little bit, but the interesting thing from that study was they took two resumes and they called one Brian and they called one Elizabeth, and they presented these two resumes, or they were appraisal forms basically, and they present to a whole load of practice managers and vets and different people, but they just gave the name The only difference on the two appraisal forms was the name. One was male, one was female. They were assessed very differently, okay? In terms of promotion, pay, get extra pay and all sorts of things. So there was a gender bias there. That was bad enough. But the other thing they did, they asked this list of assessors, these practice managers, and said, do you believe there is a gender bias in the veterinary profession? And the ones that were most biased thought there was the least bias. Okay, so they're blind to their own faults. And that was not just true of veterinary, that was true of a lot of places. So yeah, it's a topical thing. It's something that needs to be addressed. Add that just the safety of females at work, after hours, and other such things. There's a whole lot of issues that have to be dealt with. But I would say we are dealing with them. And Esme, you'd probably be better placed to say how that works in the corporate environment than I would.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I feel quite happy with being in corporate, because I am part of my practice is part of corporate, because I know I have got a pay scale, so I was given what a vet of my qualification would be given as a salary, and I didn't have to battle for that. But I have colleagues and peers who I know they're on half the salary of a male in their practice. But I don't have that as a problem. But then, it's a very difficult topic, I think, across the board in every profession. And then you take into account minorities and things. You've always got issues there. So I don't think the vet profession is sort of outside of that, despite us being mostly female now. But hopefully we are improving.
Part of that bias was also because the females tend to be younger in the profession and the males tend to be older. We got an automatic bias anyway. But when they took that out, it wasn't quite as bad. It was certainly still there. So Esme, I think I've lost you for a bit there. Well, I'll carry on in that case. Lynn's got another question. What impact will the current COVID-19 have on practices, business models? Will owners bear more costs as a result? Will practices seek to trim costs? I think we lost Esme for that. She'll pop back in a minute. Good question, Lynn. COVID's had a massive impact on all businesses, as you know. What we've had to do in the veterinary profession is PPE, protection of our teams and our staff, because with the current track and trace, if one team member goes down, the whole team's out. And therefore you don't have a vet. And so they're having to protect their teams, these micro groups, pretty strongly. The other thing we've done is gone for video consults and remote consulting. Of course, they're keeping most of you in the car parks and bringing the animals in that way. How long that sort of situation has to go on, we don't know. But a lot of vets are under pressure, say, well, why can't we now come back into the building? And it's because if we get one breakdown of COVID in that building, boom, the whole building shuts down, and that's the end of it. So vets are having to protect their teams and the clients, for that matter, very, very strongly. So if I can ask them anything, do not pressure your vets for that access into the building, because they are doing it for very good reasons, etc. Second part of your question is, now we're doing the same work, but everything's taking an extra twice as long, because we've got to get the animal in, we've got to do the assessment, we've got to ring the client, so everything's slower. And so the costs are the same. So there may well be a matter where the vets will have to put on extra costs for the times that they are using to treat those animals, because it's a cost to them. And including now with furlough ending, bringing lots of staff back with maybe not a lot more work, it's going to be an interesting dynamic. That's something we're trying to advise people on that. So hopefully that answers the question. But the short answer is, it's likely COVID's going to cost somebody for something, and someone has to pay the bills. Welcome back.
Sorry about that, guys. My internet's just dropped out for no reason. Hopefully it won't happen again.
You did
So I wanted to touch on commission-based things, because this is something that I hear quite a lot, that vets get commission for selling food or flea products or something. We get commission from something, and I'm yet to receive my payment from the commission that we're supposed to get, as I keep telling you. But could you explain a little bit about that? Because I think that is one of the things we get asked about a lot?
I assume that the question is focused on, why do vets offer you food, why they offer you wormers, offer you flu? Is there some incentive for them to sell these products? And so products is the main thing. Just come back a little bit. Product sales are very good for veterinary practice because we buy it in from the wholesaler. We do put a markup on it to cover the handling and the storage and something, and it's reasonable like any other retail business, and we sell that on, we make some money on it. The profit on that is normally around 15 to 25%, okay, which is a reasonable profit on that. Interestingly, because vets services, so the consultations, the diagnostic procedures, the surgical procedures, are not a product, they're just something we do, they are often undercharged massively, and vets make most of their profit, if any, that 5 to 7% we spoke about earlier, from the drug sales, and very little from their actual time treating animals. And if you do the sums, we can prove that quite clearly. So there is, that's maybe something you didn't know, but there's an issue in that. That's why the profit is low. If you make 25% profit on your drugs, but you make minus 10% on your services, you only end up with 15, if that's how it balances out. So why wouldn't vets not be incentivized to sell more products if that's the high product stuff? One, it's illegal. Two, we just don't do it. And the reason they offer you all these things is because it's people like me as consultants say, guys, you've got to service your clients full service. If you honestly believe that this food will help its condition, and don't forget, the foods are not just dog food, they're prescription diets mostly that are compounded to help with conditions. I always tell the story. If you went to Africa and you saw the poverty and the destitution and the starvation and the lack of water and the hygiene, but you decided to build a university because that's the best thing you could do, and you hadn't addressed all that other stuff, what's the point? So from a vet's perspective, if a pet is fed well, it's wormed regularly, has flea control on a regular basis, has an examination, its teeth are cleaned, and it just gets a general once a year. That's the basics. We got to do that for every animal. So that's the basis of the vaccination, and that's the basis of we recommend you take these products because we've looked at them and decided they work. But to answer your question, it's like, no, there's no commissions come through on that. No, the bosses don't get commissions. Now they can negotiate best price for the product, for sure. That's one thing. That's just good business. But once we've got the price, we buy it, we pay the money over for that. Then it's our job to resell that in the appropriate manner. And I always say with the professional, ethical hat on, but that's not most vets do it. There might be a few sharks out there, but I have not met many of them, or they're not in my field anyway.
No,
even in the corporate world, I don't see that as an issue.
No, I mean, I'm really lucky. My boss always said that as long as you're being a good vet, you'll make money because you're doing the right by that pet, and you know that you're doing the right thing. So I've never felt that I've had to sell something I didn't really think that dog or cat needed. And I just offer what I think is best for them, and if it's up to the client as to whether they take it or not, isn't it? But what effect do you think it's had with the online selling of drugs? Because obviously there's a big competition at the moment, and I think that's something that our followers on Holly's Army, which is our owner advice forum, they ask a lot because there's a big disparity between the price of drugs in practice and the price of drugs online.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to sell microphones. Okay. So if I build a big shop, call it the microphone shop, I fill it full of staff and fill it full of every microphone I can find. I do my marketing plan and I promote it online, I promote it through the media. That's cost me already a fair amount of money. So I've got to sell that microphone with a reasonable margin that covers that back-end cost. My wages, other people's wages, the bricks and mortar, etc. And as I said, 60, 70% of the £100 that comes in goes to just feeding that part of business, just to keep the practice on the ground and the people in it and it functioning. Okay? Yeah. And then there's the drugs on top of that. If I'm sitting in my office at home on the internet and I do order a microphone and send it to you and I never touch the item, I can do that really, really cheaply. It costs me nothing to do that, okay? And I can probably sell some stuff below what I paid for it just to get you as a customer, because I know on the back end you'll be buying other stuff at a higher margin, etc. Short answer, it's a totally different business model. Therefore, the cost of items will be different. Now, so why would you buy anything from the vet? Okay, one, convenience. If you're there anyway, and the vet says you need a 2-week course of antibiotics, are you going to go online and buy that? Maybe you could, but you need it and you need it now. That would be sensible to buy. Is it that much different? What the vet needs to do, though, you can't just go and get that. You need a prescription. So the vet has to do another process called writing a prescription, just as your doctor would do if he was providing you with a prescription, she would do, providing you with a prescription for some drugs. And there's, of course, NHS, there is a cost to that. You pay £7 something at the chemist for that. But in the veterinary world, there is no NHS, so the vet can charge for that. And that might vary from £5 to £15, depending on what the products are. So that would be other ways. But of course, what you've got to do is then take that prescription, go online, submit the prescription, get it delivered to you, etc. So if the convenience is worth it, and I would say for long-term medication, so particularly arthritis drugs, okay, it probably makes sense if your animal's on long-term medication to set up a situation with your vet, say, I need a prescription on a regular basis. I can buy it through the internet because it will be cheaper. There's no two ways about it, okay?
Yeah.
But does the convenience and relationship, but equally the vet can only write that prescription if the animal is under their care. So if it's under my care, I need to at least examine that animal every, depending on the condition, 3-6 months is the normal time of being under my care consideration. If it's an acute condition, kidney failure, heart failure, I'd want to see it every 3 months. And I'm going to charge you for that pleasure, okay?
Yeah.
Because that's my job. I need to charge you for that time of that to make sure that the medication is right, it's the right dosage, it's been given okay, and the condition is either stable or improving. And then I'll write you a prescription, you can pay for that, and off you go. Everyone's happy. But that's the way the deal works. We are bound by law, not through commerce, but by law to do that prescription examination, because the animal must be under our care. And we are, bound to charge you for our time to write prescriptions, etc. So it's relatively simple. For short-term stuff, you take it from the vet. Makes sense. For long-term stuff, set up an arrangement with your vet that covers the cost of that. It's quite simple to do.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And then my next question is kind of going on about, we're talking about the expensiveness of vets. I want to ask you about emergency and out-of-hours vets. Why are they so expensive? And also, kind of as a strain on for that, why are emergency procedures so expensive?
Okay, so this is after hours or?
Yeah.
Okay, so after hours. Okay, so everyone's gone home, everyone's in that bed, had their dinner, seen the kids and everything. Some people are still at work, okay? So they're our emergency and critical care vets. They're usually in they're either members of the practice you saw in the day, working extra shifts at night to cover that time. So they either have to leave home and come in to see you, okay, for that treatment, or they might be an emergency and critical care centre, a Vets Now or one of those emergency or a private centre, where they're specifically employed to be there for emergency cases. Now, by their nature, emergency cases are usually very difficult and really quite serious. Not all, some are perceived as serious, but that's how we have to deal with it. We have to deal with everything as though it is serious and deal with it that way. Therefore, you've got the whole building, all the equipment, all the x-ray, all the lab work, all the stuff that's necessary at a human critical care unit in that building, available for you for that half an hour that you need your animal seen. Okay? So there's an overhead cost to that. Equally, the vets that tend to do emergency critical care professionally are highly trained individuals. They've done extra studies to make sure that's happening as well. Again, the long and short of it is that to provide that service is just damn expensive. It just costs a lot of money to do that. And don't forget, they're there for you. And don't forget, most of them have to get up the next morning and go back to work again. In another way. So you'd have to pay me a lot of money to do that job, that's for sure, on that basis. And you probably wouldn't want to pay me these days because I'm probably way out of that one as well. I mean, again, I think we're somewhat spoiled by the NHS. I think we're somewhat spoiled by the perceptions of healthcare we have in this country. In a couple of distinctions, in Scandinavian countries, they don't sell any drugs. Everything is by prescription. So the vets have to charge their professional time much, much higher than we do here. So whereas we would probably charge 40 or so pounds for a consultation prescription, that'll be near 100 to 120 euros in Scandinavia, just for the same procedure, because they charge so much more for their time, because they're not subsidizing their business with drug sales. Okay, is one thing. The other thing is, what was I going to say? Oh, there was another piece I'll come to, I've forgotten now. But yeah, but it's just expensive delivering. Sorry, NHS was the thing here. In countries where they don't have healthcare, America, where they have to pay for their healthcare, veterinary fees again are generally much higher. So there's an artificial pressure from the NHS to keep our prices low, but that doesn't serve vets particularly well, because then they can't always provide the full service.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at different pricing sort of structures of what it costs in the NHS versus what we charge, and actually most of the time we're charging way less than what it actually costs the NHS to do something. And we aren't a big, we might only, I don't know, our little practice has to fund itself, so we haven't got access to loads of x-ray machines or loads and loads of radiographers to do the x-rays. It's it's all proportional. So actually we are offering a very good value service. I think we can forget that as vets sometimes, because we feel like we're charging so much money. You do worry about costs of things, but when you actually look at what we're charging, it's a bargain.
Don't forget, when they come and see you, they're getting their doctor, their physician, their cardiologist, their ophthalmologist, their nephrologist, their gynecologist, their dentist, all in one go. That's the skill set that every practice needs to provide at some level to make that happen as well. Whereas in a hospital, you'd be shunted off all over the place to make that happen. Oh, we've lost. Well, it isn't there again. Yeah, some good questions coming through. You're back.
Yeah, my internet's doing something funny tonight, so I apologise about that. I think everyone's just talking a bit about whether Penny was saying, Penny and most who are asking about whether if you dropped the price of drugs and vets made a smaller profit, would that make owners buy the drugs more from the vets rather than online?
I've got a real issue here. I say to my vets that you are subsidising your business through drug sales, however you charge for it, and charge for that. And some vets go and price match the internet, and they're just doing their business, no service whatsoever.
Yeah.
I would much prefer that vets charge properly for their time, which means the consultation fees, your surgical fees, and your diagnostic fees will probably go up. Charge that appropriately for what you need to charge, and then not rely on drug sales to actually keep your business afloat. And so you get this quid pro quo. Yes, your services will go up, but your drug sales will come down. Or you can have it the other way. But guess what? The overall cost is probably going to be much the same. And personally, it should be somewhat higher than it is. Now, they did a study in Canada, Forum of Small Business, and they looked at a number of professions. They looked at car mechanics, they looked at physiotherapists, they looked at accountants, they looked at solicitors, they looked at dentists, and they looked at vets. And they went through their pricing structure or their invoicing structure, and they worked out on average how much those professions discounted their services for whatever reasons. So accountants at 0, they don't discount anybody, okay. Lawyers about 5%, okay, some nice stuff in there. Dentists were around 10%. Pharmacists were 0, because all there's is product. There's no service in there. Yeah. But when you got into physios and chiropractors, it got up to 10, 15, 18% in some cases, or quite hefty discounting when you got the human interaction involved. So the more human orientated the profession, the more discounting we got. I'd ask you, what they did vets as well. What would you guess was the discount that vets tended to apply to their services? Just pick a figure out of it.
I'm going to say 15%.
15, okay, and people want to put a figure in there, but it was 41%. 41, and this is a proper study done. They're really clever in the way they do discount stuff. And like I said, so actually the clients are getting a very good deal most of the time. The trouble is it's not structured and you don't know you're getting a very good deal is half the trouble. But come back to the original point, veterinary business is very expensive. So whatever you consider expensive is probably less than it should be overall. And of course, what I've advised people, if you've got dogs, got cats, got pets, one, get it on a preventative healthcare scheme so it is looked after, you get the basics at a reasonable cost. That stuff vets again, discount 10, 15% quite happily. So you take the whole package, your worming, your flea, your vaccines, etc. Discounts on your neutering and dental using. Get insured, absolutely get insured, because without insurance, you're going to or start a savings plan for your pet. As soon as you get your pet, start a savings plan. Put some money in every week, every month, so you've got that build up, or have insurance for that as well. Those two things are probably the most important financial things, because the average pet can cost anything from £1,200 to £1,800 a year. And that's including food and other such things as well. So it's no mean feat to take on an animal. And veterinary fees is part of it. It's not the vet's fault that it's expensive. It's just is expensive. Oh, I think the internet's dropped again, Esme.
Can you hear me?
You're back. Yes.
Hello. Oh, I don't know what my computer's doing. So what do practices have to offer legally? What do they have to offer the client in terms of services, so out of hours cover, that sort of thing?
Okay. From our dictate from the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, our professional responsibility is to provide access to an after-hours service. So we don't have to do it ourselves. We just have to make sure people are sent to within reasonable distance. So that's probably half-hour drive time is what we can do. So if you're not, and a lot of practices these days don't provide their own after-hours because it's too much of a burden on the people that work in the practice. If you've got to work all day in that environment and then get no sleep for half the night the next night, it is physically destroying. It actually damages people's health not to lose out on that amount of sleep. It's mentally damaging, and we've already got a huge mental health risk in the profession already, and after hours doesn't help. So we don't advocate people do after hours. They use a specialist after hours provider if it's available. If not, and if you're in the middle of Wales or you're down in the southeast or something like that, you're going to have to do it yourself. And so you've got to put vets on a rota to do this, and you've got to give people time off in lieu to recover. And it's really hard to employ young vets who don't want to do that after hours stuff. Okay, so you get compounded problems with that as well. Personally, in America, they don't have to. That's again not a requirement of vet. Perhaps they can shut their doors at 6 o'clock and all go home. Okay, which is much more civilized, but not great. But of course, a lot of these bigger cities have emergency centres people can use and go to that way. But beyond that, not a lot. Just be nice to people, which we generally are. Practice better medicine. Of course, we do have a disciplinary process that if clients are unhappy, they can actually put those complaints to the Royal Veterinary College and they will be looked at. They have a very robust disciplinary process. And again, adds to the stress of things, but 99% of it is just poor communication. Just poor communication. Being able to listen, number one, and being able to express these things. And that works on both sides, absolutely. On both sides it needs to happen.
Yeah. And then, so as a client, what can you ask for from your vet? So what sort of things could you, so for example, would you, if you want extra time in an appointment, or what sort of things can clients ask for?
Anything you like, I would imagine, to any sensible, broad-minded vet. The biggest challenge you're up against is busyness. Busy. So most of our clients, they do 15-minute consultations. So they try and give you plenty of time in the consultation room. You can use that time. Some practices still working at 10 minutes. I think that's a bit tight for a quality conversation and consultation. So 15 minutes. Now, if you've got a particular problem, and often you don't know it takes more until you're in the consulting room, like a difficult skin problem or a difficult case that needs further investigation, vets will often admit those to carry on with those procedures. Most vets just run over time. They just keep the next client waiting, which might be you in this case, so you get the bad end of that stick, but the client in front of you gets the time that's needed as a result. But of course, that stacks up to getting later and later through the day. No one finishes on time. No one can get home on time. Adds to the stress. It takes a lot of organisation. If you need more time, ask for it. But of course, the receptionist is generally the one booking the consultation. But if you book a double consultation, expect to pay a double fee. It's twice the time. I mean, that's the simplistic process of it. A lot of vets will give you more time without an extra charge quite happily, okay? But it does make their day complex as well with that. What were some other things on your list?
Things like asking for the last appointment of a session or on the day, if you've got a particularly frightened animal.
Very sensible things to do. If you make your concerns known, I can't imagine that most vets won't try and do something about it. A lot of practices now have a quiet room, somewhere they can take animals where it's a bit quiet. A lot of vets now, because with COVID, we're going out to the cars anyway. And the other real boon that's happening at the moment, a lot of vets have taken up remote consulting, say video consultations on apps. So if you've got a frightened dog and you don't want to bring it in just to be told it's got X, Y, Z, book it. If the vets do it, book a video consultation. The vet can see it in its natural environment on the video phone, etc. You need to turn the lights on and make it easy to see the animal. And the vet can advise, at least not make a diagnosis, but can certainly advise, say, okay, I can see what's happening now. Unfortunately, it will need to come in, but how about you pick up some tranquilizers first or do something of that nature, or we'll see you towards the end of the session when there's less dogs around, etc. And so using a combination of communication tools like that can be a very, very useful thing. So just check with your vets, do they have an online app that they can actually, 1, book appointments, book video consultations, and 3, can they pay online as well, which makes the whole thing very much simpler.
Yeah. And the other things I was going to say was things like if they wanted to stay with the dog or they want to see the same vet, sometimes those are things you can ask in advance, and vets will try and do their best to accommodate.
Yeah, well, as you know, vets need time off as well, so we try and work out 40 hours. If we're not there, we can't be seen, but a lot of vets are very, very keen on continuity, of making sure the same people see the same vet, which is, yes, perfectly reasonable thing to ask for in the whole process.
Yeah, I'm just having a read through on what people have said. Lynn said they've got a wellness plan and that they get their free consults and other services on there, so that suits them to have a consult at any time. So most practices have some kind of wellness plan, whether you get consults or whatever it may be that's included. And I guess the more people that sign up to those for the vet practice, the better, because that is a regular source of income, and you know that you're going to see, from a vet's point of view, the reason I like it is I know I'm going to see that pet at least every 6 months on my plan. So, and it costs the owner no more to do that. So I know that I can say to them, please come back in 6 months. I want to take this pet again. And they're not going to worry about doing that. So I love the wellness plans.
Those health plans with consultations included are relatively new. So not every practice has those. But I think they're a brilliant idea because they give you that freedom to get advice when you need it. You tend to take the animal in quicker and faster. The vets, as you say, love it because they know that they're not having to have the money conversation, particularly because it's all paid for up front. You do have to pay for the back end stuff, the diagnostics and surgery, obviously, but it's a great system. So ask your vet about that and say, have they got a scheme whereby they can cover their consultation and things that way? It works really well. And they're generally priced not to charge a consultation every month. They're generally priced to cover 2 or 3 consultations a year.
Yeah, that's what ours is. I think is you get your booster and you get a 6-month health check as well, which is brilliant. And for the majority of dogs who are healthy and they're on the wellness plan anyway, that's all they need most years. So we only see them twice a year until maybe, unfortunately, something crops up later in the year, or they do something silly or whatever it may be. So I think they're really well worth the money for the owner, and they don't have to worry about anything. You've already paid for your flea treatment, your worming treatment. You know you're getting products that work, and then you get your booster. So I think they're a no-brainer, and I have my own pets on them because it's such good value, even as a vet.
And don't forget, post-COVID, we're not sure what the economy is going to look like. So those sort of schemes really, you get the services cheaper because they're discounted generally, but you've also got a regular payment you can just forget about, and you know you're going to get covered for all that sort of emergency work. So yeah, no, really good idea.
I just wanted to just highlight what Hannah has said, and I think this is really useful. It goes back to the NHS conversation, and she's saying about individual stories help explain the costs of different procedures, and she's saying for a woman it's £6,000 for a hysterectomy, and we're talking about a couple of £100 for a bitch spay, which is exactly the same procedure, maybe slightly different direction that our wounds go in, but otherwise it is the same procedure, and we're probably more used to doing them than a lot of the gynecologists because we do them very routinely. But yeah, that is a really good example of the complete difference in pricing that we are doing. And I think, you'll be able to tell us more about this, but sorry, that's cropped up. I think a lot of practices make a loss on their routine spaying and neutering, don't they? I think that's quite often.
They make, neutering of bitches and dogs is a subsidised procedure. If you actually charged out what it's called a laparotomy, when you open up the abdomen, and a full hysterectomy on a bitch, and you charge that out properly with fluids and the anaesthetics and the sedation, etc. Normally they should, if you charge that as you would charge a abdominal investigation surgery, it's going to be somewhere around £600-700, and most vets are charging £200 to £300 max for that. So it's at worst or at best half price, probably cheaper than that. So there's no money to be made from doing neutering. It's a welfare issue that the profession, through its wisdom somewhere, decided that we will subsidise the neutering of animals. And it's a wonderful thing because it stops unnecessary breeding, etc. going on. It solves a lot of behavioural problems in dogs and bitches as well, and saves a lot of medical problems around memory tumours and other such things. But it doesn't earn any money any profit for the practice. What does happen, it is something we do routinely, so it's very good for our surgical skills, if nothing else. And it's a thing we do. But yeah, don't be fooled by the £300 that was a rip-off. That was an absolute medical wonder that they could do it at that price. In my view. So yeah.
Hopefully tonight's talk has come some way to just explain to people who have a little bit of a misconception that vets are money grabbers, that just to kind of put it in perspective about where money actually goes in a vet practice and how expensive it is to run a practice, and also that we as vets genuinely do care about your animals, and we go home and we have sleepless nights and many weekends of worrying about them, and I'll often ring the owners on a Monday after all weekend stressed about how Fluffy's done all weekend, and we're not out there to, I don't know a single vet who works by wanting to make money. I know all the vets I know just want to make pets better, but I think you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head when you talk about communication being a problem sometimes, and not having the time to always thoroughly explain the value of what we're doing. So it's been extremely beneficial to have you here, and we're so grateful for you to, one, be brave enough to tackle these subjects because we know a lot of people wouldn't want to do it, and two, for joining us here tonight, Alan.
Absolute pleasure. And like I said, it's nice to put us all across as saints in this veterinary world. We're human. We struggle, we fail, but we do our best to do what we can. So a little bit of compassion on both sides goes an awful long way. So I hope everyone does really well with that. So thank you again for having me on. Really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
And thank you everybody for joining us. Hope you've had a lovely evening. And if you've got any further questions, do just post them. We'll get back to you and try and answer them as best we can.